Hawthorne and Sycamore, it's so lovely to see you all again. I'm going to read the next part of our class reader from The Skylarks War by Hilary McKay. So far, we have met most of the main characters. We've met Clary and her brother Peter, who live with their dad, who doesn't seem to like their company very much. Their mother died a few days after Clary's birth. We've also met Rupert, who is Clary's and Peter's cousin, and his parents were last seen going on a steamboat train to Calcutta. And then you've got their grandparents, who have a lovely house in Cornwall, which is where they are at the moment. And then I think Alice is the other name I can think of, who is the horse that the grandparents own. You'll find out a bit more about Alice actually in this book. So the next chapter was chapter 6, swimming lessons. "And what will you do with yourself while your brother's laid up?" Clary's grandfather asked her. "I thought I might learn to swim," said Clary, and he burst out laughing and said, "Haha, very good," and later told her grandmother that she was quite a little character, as if she had proposed to take up golf or arranging the flowers in church. However, Clary was perfectly serious. For a long time she had envied the boys their swimming. They went almost every day. "Well, you're a girl and they are boys," Clary's grandmother had said when Clary first mentioned it a year or two before, and at the time Clary had nodded, disappointed but accepting. There were a lot of things to accept. She found about the differences between girls and boys, that boys had pocket money and girls didn't. That boys needed to learn things at school, but girls had to be quietly occupied. That Peter had a bicycle and could ride all over town, but that her own boundaries were school, 2-minute walk away, and Miss Vane's house across the road. And most of all, that the boys knew best, and the boys were best. It was fact, it was life, it was natural history, perhaps, thought Clary, doubtfully. She was determined to learn to swim. Grandmother was wrong. Girls did swim. She'd seen them sometimes from the beach. Rupert had learned to swim when he was 8 in the concrete tank at boarding school. Unheated, grey water, 6 feet deep, straight in, and no shrieking. Oof. Every boy in the school learned to swim. It was the only sensible thing to do, the alternative being to drown. After the school swimming tank, the buoyant blue and green waters of the Cornish coast were easy, a foaming translucent element of liquid, airy joy. Rupert, on a hot summer's day, would leave his grandparents' house to run across fields and moors, racing along narrow fox tracks between bramble and gorse, and galloping through craggy stretches of bog, not pausing for thorns, nor the fiery patches his sand shoes rubbed on his heels, shoving aside fat sheep, arrowing his way to where the cliff dipped down to the sea. At this point, whether at high tide or low, there was always deep water. In the last few yards of his race, Rupert shed shirt and shoes, and when he reached the edge of the land, he leaped without pausing. Each time was the best moment of his life, one element to another, one world to another. Escape. It was not the same for Peter. Even before he broke his leg, he wasn't much of a runner. The first time he saw Rupert leap from the cliff, he assumed his cousin would drown. He hurried to the edge and peered over. There was Rupert, not far below him, laughing and blowing like a human porpoise in the glinting blue water. "Come on in," called Rupert. Every now and then Peter was struck by a mood of reckless madness. It hit him then, so he dragged off his clothes and in his skinny tangle of shoulders and shin bones, he hit the rocking sea. Peter could swim too. Twice a week in summer term, the boys from his day school were marched down to the town pool. In water, Peter was agile as Rupert. He could dive as well. He had been the first to take off from the cliff in a swooping header, but it was Rupert who had said the year before, "We should bring Clary." "She can't swim," said Peter. "She'd soon learn like we did." Clary, when asked, said, Yes, please, but how could I? What would I wear?" They looked blank. "What do you wear?" "Bathing suits, or we don't bother." "I can't not bother, and I haven't got a bathing suit," said Clary. "Ask grandmother," suggested Rupert, but that was no use. Clary's grandmother said that little girls paddled. They paddled in their summer dresses carefully at the water's edge, having left their shoes and stockings neatly on a rock. This behaviour entirely prevented any risk of drowning, said Clary's grandmother, and closed the sitting room door. Clary, in private, contemplated her reflection in her knickers and her Liberty bodice. It was awful. She tried on Peter's old bathing suit and it hung in the back loops from her shoulders to her knees, and she gave up hope of swimming with the boys that year, although she often sat on the cliff above, watching as they dived and porpoised through the blue and green water. And then the next summer, there was the Sovereign. It was agony to part with it, but she did, and for 10 shillings bought a girl's black bathing suit from a dismal little shop near the marketplace. It was made of wool, rather rubbed up because it was not new, baggy around her knees, and gathered with large bright blue bows on the shoulders. Clary didn't like the bows, but the bathing suit was the lightest thing she had ever worn. She put it on and pranced into Peter's room, saying, "Look, look, look!" Peter was lying in his bed, reading and resting his aching leg. He put down his book and peered at her. He said, "It's the worst thing I've ever seen you wearing." "Oh," said Clary, "it can't be." "It is. Can you get that blue ribbon muck off? The bows, they're what hold it on." "Well, it's awful," said Peter, picking up his book again. "Wait till Roop sees it. He'll tell you." "What'll I tell her?" said Roopy, coming in just then. "Oh, crikey, Clary!" "What?" demanded Clary. "Did you make it yourself?" "I bought it," said Clary, "with my own money, some of my birthday sovereign." "From a shop?" asked Rupert incredulously, and then, seeing Clary's face and remembering his manners, added, "Well done, good for you, superb." "Are you mad?" asked Peter. "Look at her." "I only wanted to learn to swim," said Clary, sighing. "I'm tired of just paddling. I know it's not a very nice swimming suit." "It's just right," said Rupert. "Come on then, put something on top and we'll try it out. We'll run across the moor." Clary cheered up tremendously, pulled a dress on the top of the bathing suit, hoped Peter could buy it, and scampered after Rupert so quickly that in less than 20 minutes they were at the cliff edge, looking down. "Now what?" asked Clary. "Jump." "Straight in? Not round by the rocks?" No, of course not. You said you were tired of paddling." "Is that what you did the first time you went swimming? Jump straight in?" "Yes, straight in, and no screaming at the cold or else detention in the gym." "And then you just started swimming, as easily as that?" "Of course," said Rupert, and he honest believed it was true. "It's not far down, is it?" "Hardly a step," said Rupert. "In you go, and you come up swimming like a duckling. Even Pete did. I'll count you in, shall I?" Clary wavered on the brink, nearly overbalancing. 3, 2... "Don't try diving. Diving needs practice. Do it in the safe way. Feet first, just to start with. Now then, 1. "The safe way," Rupert had said, and Clary shut her eyes, stepped into nothingness, flailed in sudden panic, and then found herself plunging down and down below the slapping green waves into such a coldness that she gasped in great panicky gulps, not of air, but of salt water. Everything ended then. The whole warm, lovely world gone in a moment. There was no direction to reach for, and no air to breathe. There was an icy grip, disbelief, then blackness. Up above, Rupert, smiling, waited for her to bob up. This did not happen. Nothing happened. The green glass sea swung and rippled, quite undisturbed. Rupert shaded his eyes and craned sideways to see if Clary was climbing up the rocks, and as he did so, he caught the sight of a small black shadow rocking in the depths. Sheet lightning fear flashed from the water, blinding Rupert as he dived. Even so, he found her, weightless as a shadow, dragged her off the surface, towed her to the rocks, rolled her over and hit her sharply between the shoulders. Water poured from Clary in streams and rivers and fountains. She was fish cold and grey granite pale. "Clary!" bellowed Rupert, and turned her upside down and shook her. She reached and came alive, but her eyes didn't open. Rupert picked her up, hung her over his shoulder, staggered across the rocks, up the steep sandy path, and lowered onto the turf. He wrapped his shirt around her, rubbed her back and shouted at her. When he propped her up, she slid sideways, heavy and limp as a jellyfish. "Oh, God, Clary!" moaned Rupert, and saw her reach out and hand to her comfort him. After a few minutes she began shaking and then crying, silently, yet more salt water pouring down her cold cheeks. "Why didn't you swim?" demanded Rupert, suddenly angry, but she only shivered and cried even more. "Poor little duckling," said Rupert, and at last Clary sat up and wiped her eyes. It took him ages to get her home. She kept stopping to lean on things. When they finally arrived, he left her in the hall and knocked on the sitting room door. This time, the grandparents were not so calm as usual. Twice in one summer was too much. First Peter, now this. It beggared belief. Every year their grandchildren were met at the station, provided with beds and catered for with astonishing quantities of food. There was sea and moorland, a town, a garden and a pony. What more could be expected? Where was his common sense? Why on earth couldn't Rupert be trusted to take care of Clary? It wasn't his fault, croaked Clary, the first word she had spoken. Never heard such nonsense, cried her grandfather, and Rupert was sent off to fetch the doctor while Clary was huddled up to bed in the room next to Peter's, piled with blankets and scolded. What happened? What's happened? What's happened? Demanded Peter. They closed his door tight, shut because they had enough to deal with as it was, and they opened it again because he was thumping on the wall with the help of his crutches. Peter dragged himself out of bed and went to join the turmoil in the room next door. She might have drowned, fumed her grandfather. A nice job for me that would have been, telling her father she'd drowned. Peter snorted and said something so outrageous that he was ordered to get out. The doctor arrived with Rupert in tow. Clary fell unhelpfully asleep in the middle of him, listening to her lungs. She slept for hours and hours. When she woke up, her grandmother was sitting beside her and looking terribly bored. I'm sorry, said Clary. Her grandmother looked down at her. I shouldn't have jumped. I guess that really. I thought Rupert must know best, finished her grandmother. Clary nodded. Now you know he doesn't, said her grandmother, not in words, but in an eloquent sniff. She gave another sniff as she picked up the sodden bundle of Clary's bathing suit from the washstand. Is this what you spent your birthday money on? What a dreadful-looking garment. It didn't take all the money, said Clary. Don't throw it away. I need it. I can't imagine what for. I'm still going to learn to swim. Oh, are you? Yes, and I heard what Peter said. Father would have minded if I drowned. Everyone would have minded. Peter most of all, said her grandmother. She got up to go then, but hesitated at the door, and then suddenly came back, stooped and kissed the top of Clary's head. You should go to sleep again now. Clary dropped off almost at once, but she woke up in the night, gasping with fear and groping blindly into the blackness surrounding her. For a day or two it hurt her chest to breathe. It rained, and she stayed in her room, reading Sherlock Holmes' adventures in faded blue paper-covered copies of the Strand magazine. Her grandfather produced some silent proof that he too was glad she had not drowned. On the third day she felt better. The sun came out and her grandmother handed her her bathing suit, dried out and transformed. The saggy legs had been shortened at the edge with the neat black bands, the blue bow on the shoulders replaced with black and white ruffles, and the seams taken in. Most surprising of all, her grandmother had news for her. She said, I've been asking my friends. I find that one of them has a grown-up daughter who swims. Also, she tells me that there is a part of the bay that is roped off for safe bathing. Would you like me to arrange for you two to meet? So in no time, Clary learned to swim after all, and later to dive. Not like ducklings, but like a slim black seal, Rupert said. See, I knew you could do it, said Peter. You shouldn't have panicked. Swimming is obvious. Swimming is not obvious, said Clary. Not unless you're a fish or a frog. Otherwise, it's a lot of puffing and managing arms as well as legs, and hair in your eyes, and being absolutely drenched. No, just wet, absolutely. Oh well, it doesn't matter. I can do it now anyway. The boys were moderately pleased with her. They were never good at admitting they were wrong, but she carried on adoring them just the same. Chapter 7. Growing Up. That autumn, Peter went back to his day school, limping slowly away each morning and returning with remedial exercises to do at night. This meant that Clary had another year of being raced through his homework. Mrs. Morgan said, amazing how some folks get their own way. It wasn't a bit like that, said Clary loyally. Oh, wasn't it, said Mrs. Morgan. Well, he couldn't have had much of a summer, I don't suppose. And what did you get up to while His Majesty was in bed all day? I learned to swim, said Clary proudly. You never did, explained Mrs. Morgan, looking impressed at last. That's something I can't do, but then I never had nobody to show me. Your cousin Rupert teach you, did he? It was his idea, said Clary, after hesitating for a moment. His and Peter's. Them two's your heroes, said Mrs. Morgan admirably. Can't do no wrong, nor ever could. I was never like that of my brother, weren't you? I was not. I used to think, well, I'm as strong as him, stronger. I'm as hard a worker, harder. I'm as good as him, for all he's a boy. So I used to think things out for myself. Mrs. Morgan gave Clary a very significant nod as if to say, and so should you. Clary ignored it. She was already beginning to think things out for herself. It was the great falling away of the illusions that was the start of growing up. A year passed. In the autumn of 1913, Peter was sent to boarding school. White-faced, sulking, and beset by black-hearted rage, he did not expect to survive. It made no difference that Rupert had been there for years, or that he had hardly ever been a boy who did not survive. appendicitis not reported soon enough, and the loose guttering of the chapel roof, which never should have been climbed. Could the school be blamed for that? No. Already Peter was much later to go than he should have been, the direct result of stepping off a moving train. It had saved him for a year, but it could do no more. It was not, as Rupert had once remarked, an escape route that could be taken twice. Anyway, Peter had brains. He should go to university, and for that he would need a scholarship. His day school was not the sort of place that got university scholarships. The boarding school was. And so an old trunk was dragged down from the attic and packed with the school uniform, a lot of it passed on from Rupert. Clary and Miss Vane filled a tuck box with gingerbread, peppermints, pots of jam and potted meat. Mrs. Morgan brought him a tub of eucalyptus ointment to rub on his chest. His father gave him a leather purse containing 4 half-crowns, 5 silver shillings and 10 sixpences. At least you're being paid, said Clary when she saw it. A train ticket was bought, and that was that. There was nothing left for Clary to do for him except stuff his pockets with brown paper bags, Peter limping, one shoe built up to make his bad leg long enough to match the other, stiff at the knee and twisted at the ankle, climbed onto the train and entered another world. This was school, and everything he'd feared. Barren, jarring, stale, always lonely and never alone. He had known it would be bad, and it was. For the first few weeks, Peter existed in a state of numb isolation. Rupert could not help him. Clary's letters were collected but unopened. It was the longest and most intense sulk of his life. But finally he began to notice people. First, a small blonde boy in the next bed. They even had a conversation. At the end of it, the blonde boy asked Peter a question. "Where would you run away to?" he demanded. "If you were running away?" "Cornwall," said Peter. Even Peter, who hardly noticed anything, noticed the swift, intense glance of the blonde boy gave him then. It was the last time he saw him. He disappeared the very same day. Peter did not tell anyone about their conversation, but all the same he wondered, had the boy made it to Cornwall? Was he happy there? If he wasn't, would he come back? Peter found himself wishing that he would. He thought of questions he would ask him if he did. He regretted not having taken more notice of the blonde boy, thinking like this. Peter felt his numbness begin to wear off, a painful process. He longed for it to return, but it would not. He felt very exposed now and took to scuffling around like a small animal under a big sky. After a few more days had passed, a new person was given to the blonde boy's bed, Bonington. The boys called him Bonners, shortened to Bones, and they called Peter Penrose, shortened, though he did not know it, to Penny, Rupert being Rosie. Peter privately labelled Bonners, the bony one in his head. The bony one was tall and thin. He had either more bones than most people, or bigger ones, or both. He showed especially around his eyes, and in his enormous hands that looked like bundles of shaking firewood. Despite the bony one's extra bones, he was not tough. He said to Peter, "I hate PE. I hate it." "So would I," said Peter, "if they made me do it. Mud, football boots, training on the big field, showers in the hut. You escape. You're lucky." It was true. Peter knew it. He was lucky. He did escape. He couldn't play football or rugby or cricket. He couldn't join in the long sodden cross-country runs, and he couldn't climb ropes in the gym. He spent the time when other people were taking part in these activities huddled beside the lukewarm radiator pipes in the hardly visited library, together with the boy with the dicky heart and the one with asthma. "What do you do while you're out there doing games?" "I go to the library." "What, on your own?" Peter told him about the boy with the bad heart and the one with the asthma, and the bony one looked at him with eyes like those of a hungry dog. He said, "I suppose you had to be born with a bad heart." "Suppose," agreed Peter. "Asthma's not catching, is it?" "No." The bony one looked at Peter's leg and the built-up shoe. "It's not that wonderful being out of PE," said Peter defensively. "It's nothing special hanging around a cold library." "Yes, it is," said the bony one. He became silent then, but the next morning he brought the subject up again. He said, "It hurts. Football hurts. Rugby really hurts. Cross-country is agony. How do you break your leg so bad?" Peter hesitated for a moment and then, for the first time, admitted the miserable truth. Jumped off a train. The bony one was far less shocked than Peter had expected him to be. He nodded thoughtfully and asked, "A moving train or a standing train?" "Moving." "Did it hurt?" "Of course." "Even so," said the bony one, still nodding, "it would only hurt once. You just have to shut your eyes and do it." He seemed, thought Peter, to be preoccupied with pain. "And if you changed your mind you didn't want to," he continued, "you could always go on the next station and get off." The bell for the chapel rang and the conversation ended, but Peter found himself concerned. He made up his mind that the next time he saw Bonington he would make something plain. He would tell him that he wished he had never jumped off the train, and also that it hurt. In fact, it never stopped hurting. Jumping off the train had been a mistake. He would tell the bony one this at bedtime and make sure he understood. However, this plan never turned out to be impossible because that night the bed next to him was empty. Peter, who since the blonde boy had become sensitive to empty beds, noticed it at once. He was alarmed, so alarmed that he slid out of bed, forbidden, crept out of the dormitory, banned, nipped down the back stairs, out of bounds, made his way along to the darkened junior common room, where no one was allowed to go after 9 o'clock, and there was a bony one halfway out the window. At first he would not tell Peter where he was going, or be persuaded to come back in. Instead he said he needed fresh air. He said he was interested in astronomy. He said that he was going to look for a book he had accidentally left outside, and he said he thought he'd heard owls. I don't believe you, said Peter. Don't then, said the bony one. It's all right for you. And he looked bitterly and jealously down at Peter's leg, and Peter looked at it too. It hurts. It hurts all the time. They pinned it with steel plates to hold it together. I can feel the steel. It hurts to walk, and it hurts to keep still. I have to wear a weird shoe. It's rubbish. You didn't tell me any of that before, said the boy accusingly. Peter shrugged. Why'd you do it? I was a coward. Why did you come after me? What do you think? To save me, said the bony one, and climbed back down from the windowsill. And the next chapter is called Simon the Bony One, which is chapter 8, and we're going to stop there today. I will read you some more of our class reader tomorrow. Take care, Hawthorne and Sycamore. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.